quorum today. We're 1 minute after 1, so we'll go ahead and get started. And we'll just start by having the roll call.
Senator Rocky Adams, Senator Carroll, Senator Douglas,
Present.
Senator Neal, Senator Nemes, Senator Thomas, Representative Blanton, here. Representative Burke,
Here.
Representative Fleming, present. Representative Lockett,
Here.
Representative Riley, here. Representative Sharp,
Present.
Representative Stevenson, Representative Petrie,
Here.
Vice Chair Howe, Co-Chair Storm,
Here.
and Co-Chair Bowling.
I am here.
Thank you.
Very good. Members, in your packet, you will see the minutes from the July 11th meeting. If those look in order, I'll entertain a motion. Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Minutes are adopted. And we'll kick off today. We did have the Board of Examiners of Psychology that was supposed to come and testify today. They had a medical emergency and are not able to make it. So we will have them hopefully next meeting to answer questions. But first up on the agenda today, we've got an update on the staff report on single bid asphalt contracts. And Jeremy, I see you're at the table there, and please get started. Also, Transportation Cabinet officials are here in attendance today, so if there are any questions from members, we can have them as well as Jeremy answer questions. So thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Skinner, and I am an analyst for the Legislative Oversight and Investigations Committee. I'm here today to present an update to our study of single bid asphalt contracts, which staff presented at the committee's December 2023 meeting. This will be an abbreviated version of our presentation from last December, and after the review of the report, I'll go over some new material requested by the committee at the December meeting. For the report, staff reviewed all Kentucky Transportation Cabinet asphalt contracts awarded from January 2018 through July 2023. Over that period, the Cabinet awarded a total of nearly $3.6 billion in asphalt contracts. In each year, the total awarded contracts were less than the total engineer's estimate, and the engineer's estimate is the Cabinet's assessment of the project's cost. Over the 5.5-year period covered, single bid asphalt projects were the most frequent result for awarded contracts. The bars on this chart represent the total number of awarded asphalt contracts from 2018 through July 2023, with the red portion of the bars reflecting the number of single bid awards, meaning that those projects only had one bidder. During most years, about half of all awards went to single bidders. The exceptions being 2020, which was affected by COVID, and the first 7 months of 2023, because again, that was a partial year of data that we reviewed. This slide shows the total awarded amount for contracts in each year divided by the total engineer's estimate for contracts where there were either one or two bidders. So, for example, from 2018 through July 2023, projects with a single bidder totaled 100.5% of their estimated costs. So what that means is that, on average, over that period, projects with one bidder were awarded at a cost of 0.5% greater than the estimate, while projects with two bidders totaled 93.5% of their estimated cost, or on average 6.5% less than the estimated cost. However, this cost differential was not consistent over time, as the difference between one and two bidders in 2022 was much smaller than any previous year, and projects with two bidders were actually more costly than those with one bidder in the 7 months of data for 2023. The prevalence of single bid asphalt contracts could be attributed to Kentucky's market. The limited competition in the market could be due to several factors, including asphalt production limitations, such as the limited amount of distance or time that an asphalt plant can be from a job site, the limited work season, which can cause staffing or other issues, and the high cost to enter the industry. Another factor is the limited number of asphalt contractors bidding on state projects. While the number of asphalt contractors in the state has remained relatively stable over time, the average number of bidders on state projects has decreased from 1.9 in 2018 to 1.5 in 2023, indicating limited competition or an increasing number of contractors uninterested in state work. Lastly, the location of asphalt plants in the state may affect competition. Asphalt plants tend to be more common around urban areas, while rural areas have fewer plants. Asphalt can be transported a limited distance from the plants, so areas with fewer plants will naturally have less competition. As such, single bid contracts are typically more prevalent in rural areas, as urban areas tend to have a higher concentration of projects within a smaller geographic area. For example, Highway Districts 5 and 6, which include Jefferson County and Northern Kentucky respectively, have fewer single bid awards than many of the more rural districts. However, this trend does not extend to Highway District 7, covering Fayette County and its surrounding counties, which had a higher percentage of single bid contracts than other urban areas in the state. So due to the high rate of single bid projects in an urban area, our first recommendation in the report is that the Cabinet should monitor single bid asphalt contracts in central Kentucky. If the pattern continues, it should contact non-bidding contractors to determine if there's a structural reason why they don't submit bids. Staff then compared Cabinet policies to federal guidance and neighboring states to determine if the Cabinet's policies are optimal to compensate for market weaknesses and barriers to entry. Kentucky generally follows the federal guidance, but in the following slides we explore a few areas where Kentucky either deviates or doesn't fully follow the federal guidance. Kentucky deviates from federal guidance in that it publishes a list of registered bidders for all projects before bidding closes. Federal guidance indicates that keeping the list of registered bidders confidential encourages a more competitive bidding environment. So our second recommendation in the report is that the Cabinet should keep registered bidders list confidential or wait until there are at least 3 potential bidders on a project before releasing the identity of bidders. Regarding engineers' estimates, Kentucky's engineers' estimate appears to use a method suggested by federal guidance. However, our staff could not verify the actual methodology used by the Cabinet. Cabinet staff stated they did not want to release information on the methodology used for the engineers' estimate because it could undermine Cabinet estimates and bidding competitiveness. So our third recommendation is that the Cabinet should ensure that it has an internal process to verify its engineers' estimate. Kentucky complies with federal guidance on the evaluation of bids, but it doesn't have written procedures for justifying the award of contracts or the rejection of bids. So our fourth recommendation in the report is that the Cabinet should develop written guidance for justifying the award or rejection of a bid. While reviewing rejected bids, our staff found that the Cabinet posted unit bid prices even when all bids were rejected. Unit bids show how contractors priced components of the project, and the unit bids essentially make up the overall bid. There's no federal guidance here, but the posting of unit bids could undermine competitiveness if the project is rebid later. So our fifth recommendation in the report is that the Cabinet should cease posting unit bid prices when it rejects all bids on a project. Federal guidelines stress that states should check for recent or current bid rigging. In our review of other states, staff found that other states have reported using a program within a commonly used highway construction project software to detect collusion. Our final recommendation is that the Cabinet should use procurement software to detect potential collusion. The Cabinet should have a policy to provide evidence to authorities if collusion is expected. In its response to legislative oversight staff, the Cabinet agreed with 5 of the report's 6 recommendations. The sole exception was our fourth recommendation, which is recommendation 3.4 in the report, related to the development of written guidance for justifying the award or rejection of a bid. The Cabinet disagreed with this recommendation, stating that they need flexibility and discretion to consider bids without revealing the threshold for awarding projects. So that is the review of the report. Following the presentation last December, Legislative Oversight Committee members requested additional information from staff. There was a question about how the Cabinet evaluates the quality of work on highway projects. Staff updated the report to include a section that details the state's quality assurance program. which is intended to ensure that materials and workmanship conform with approved plans and specifications. The section also discusses the Cabinet's post-construction review program, where completed projects are reviewed. There was a request from the committee for the percentage of awards that exceeded the engineer's estimates. The bars on this chart represent the total number of awarded asphalt projects from January 2018 through July 2023. The red portion of the bars reflect the number of contracts awarded at a cost greater than the estimate. Excluding 2020, the percentage of projects above the engineer's estimate rose from 29% in 2018 to 45% for the first 7 months of 2023. And this information is included on pages 22 and 23 of the report. This figure is similar to the previous one. However, it shows the number of asphalt projects with just a single bidder. Nearly 60% of all projects with a single bidder were awarded at an amount above the engineer's estimate. Over that period, the total amount of single bid awarded contracts exceeded the total of the respective engineer's estimates by $9.5 million. Finally, the committee requested information on how Kentucky's contracts compare to those in other states. Staff sent requests to all states bordering Kentucky. 3 states, Indiana, Ohio, and West Virginia, provided contract data. We've included this analysis in the committee members' folders. I'm going to go over some of the results, but the data should be interpreted with caution because the data sets are not completely comparable. I'll give some examples of this as I go through some of the findings. For example, this figure shows the number of lettings awarded when there was only a single bidder, and a letting is a compilation of projects posted for bids. Kentucky has the highest rate with single bids at about 50%. The next highest by percentage is West Virginia at 32%. And as you can see here, there's an obvious difference in the number of lettings or projects between states, and this is an opportunity to describe some of the issues with the comparability of data we encountered. Kentucky's data set was based on any awarded project that included an asphalt requirement in its proposal. West Virginia staff provided data on paving and resurfacing projects only, which is a much narrower scope. So while Kentucky tends to have more single bid awards than some of its neighbor states, the effects of this are not as clear because single bid contracts are at a relatively lower cost in Kentucky when compared to other states. This table shows the average ratio of awarded bids to the engineer's estimate for each state. So for example, a ratio of 104% means that on average winning bids are 4% greater than the engineer's estimate. Kentucky's ratio for single bid awards is lower than for Indiana or Ohio, indicating that single bid contracts in Kentucky tend to be closer to the state's estimate for the project. But a limitation with this comparison is that there's no guarantee that the states listed here use the same methodologies to calculate their estimates. So that concludes our presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have for us. And if needed, Mr. Spears, our committee staff administrator, will speak up too as well because he did work on this project. So.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And at this time, we will take questions. And Representative Lockett has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question for you. You just talked about, it looks like it's on page 24 of the presentation, the other states' analysis on the projects. Indiana and Ohio, respectively, 10% and 15% are single bid contracts. Do you know in that data why they only have 10% or only 15? Is it like, do they have more plants? Are they closer to, like, what is the data that says they're down at 10% and we're at 50?
I don't have that information, but that's a relevant question, though, because that is part of the factors that we consider when thinking about why are there more single bid contracts, because more plants, within a geographic area typically leads to more competitiveness. But as far as that goes, William, I don't know, do we have any information on hand as far as that goes?
No, we don't have any information on hand. Part of the problem with this comparison is when we sent in a request to other states, we got a much more limited data set than what we got from Kentucky. When we looked at the plants in Kentucky, that actually didn't come from the transportation cabinet. We had to produce that ourselves from other organizations, and we just didn't have information available to do that analysis. Jeremy is right. That's a valid question, though.
Yeah, we'll go back and look at that data to see if there's any patterns that we do notice or any kind of way to answer that. But
Thank you. Senator Howe.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for all of your work on this. I know it wasn't easy, but we appreciate you digging into this and helping walk us through it. Looking at slides 21 and 22, the comparison of estimates over the engineer estimate, it shows a high line of single bid being over it, but that line narrows considerably in the last couple of years. Did you find anything that you could attribute this to? Because I know, for instance, in 2021, the difference in over engineers' estimates on single bid was 64% relative to all projects at 40%, but that differential narrows to 9% last year. So, on its face, there appear to be some problems with single bid contracts in a vacuum, but that seems to be a tightening of the deviation a lot. I just wondered if y'all had run into anything that might help explain that.
it fluctuates. We don't know the actual reason for why it fluctuates over time necessarily. I mean, obviously in 2020, there's major differences that can be attributed to, obviously COVID. But so if you asked about 2020, I would have a great answer for you. But as far as after that, the fluctuations, no, but I don't know that there was a particular pattern that we picked up on, honestly.
No, I mean, we didn't see an obvious explanation for that. I know we talked to a few different contractors and they indicated their behaviors changed a little bit starting in 2020. And it sounds like, from what I remember, they said they were still recovering a little bit from then, from that event. But otherwise, that's all we know about it.
I know they mentioned staffing issues in particular and transportation issues with trucking being possibly part of the issue, which could lead to competition problems. If people are having issues with staffing and transportation, they're probably not going to bid on a project. So.
We haven't heard that in anybody else throughout the state.
We did, yes, some contractors did mention that when we talked to them, yes.
Mr. Chairman, can I have a leave for another question? Was there anything in your discussion where with the high number of single bid contracts we have, is attributed to maybe approval and turnaround time and estimation time from the Department of Transportation that kind of leads to a higher number of this? Does that impact anything? Did that ever come up?
I don't think we mentioned it during the presentation. I know, and I've normally, since it's been a little while since we talked to some of the contractors, it's been a little while, but I do remember, I don't know about turnaround time so much as they mentioned it, but I know that some of the contractors who we talked to had the specifications are a little stricter, I think, for state work than for private work. So that sometimes plays a role in it, and there are other factors like that that could be affecting in some areas, especially in areas, more urban areas where there are more jobs beyond state, highway projects or things like that. So that could be affecting it. Yes, different kinds of just. Different kind of factors involved with working with the state on projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to slide number 19 or page 19, there was a suggestion that the Transportation Cabinet agreed with 5 of the 6 recommendations. During this time, was there any suggestion or any movement to implement? Agreeing and implementation are totally different.
Yes. I don't think we have not followed up with them. They are here to discuss this, so that's probably a question for them to answer. But they did, yes, at the time, and because of the time constraints on the presentation, they did give steps they were going to take when we did the last presentation as far as each recommendation. But as far as have they actually implemented them in that time since, I'm not aware of that at this point. So there might be something to ask them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And the Transportation Cabinet officials, would you all have a response to that on how implementation is coming on those recommendations?
James Ballinger, State Highway Engineer, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet.
And John Moore, Deputy State Highway Engineer.
Yeah, and I'd like
Thank
to
you.
start by saying thank you to the committee, and thank you, Co-Chair, for having us here today and responding. And want to say that we appreciate the work of the committee and appreciate the recommendations. Though it's a lot of work, and we do have the same goal. You know, we want as much competition as we can on all the contracts that we advertise. And we're in the stages of implementing the recommendations, the 5 of the 6 that we definitely agree with, and we have the same position as we did from the December 2023 testimony that we gave. We're of course waiting on the final report today, and then we can finish those implementing the recommendations that we had and we talked about in December. But yes, we have started actually implementing these recommendations.
Okay, well, upon adoption of this today, could you all provide us with some follow-up, maybe 30, 60 days out of how implementation's going, which recommendations you have fully implemented, where you are in that process? That'd be very helpful and good information for the committee to have.
Yes, sir, we can do that, Co-Chair.
All right, thank you. And with that, I see no more questions on this. Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have just a really quick question, more of a clarification. Jeremy, if you don't mind, on page slide 7, you have structural reasons. Could you expand on that? I got in my mind what that means, but I want to make sure I'm clear.
Yes, we want to. Structural means just essentially like, are there issues with the contracts, with the projects themselves that are preventing contractors from bidding on them? Are there issues in the community? Are there more private jobs? Just some sort of, are there factors in the area that maybe aren't present in some of the other urban areas that are preventing contractors in that area from bidding on state projects?
So I guess you're referring to, is it logistically challenging for them to move from point A to point B?
Yes.
Is the materials not readily available for them in order to deliver the product? And then maybe just because they don't want to bid.
Yeah,
they got too
because
too much work.
Yeah.
So okay, thank you.
Just to add on to Jeremy's answer, it could also be that maybe the contracts are structured in such a way where maybe they don't want to bid on that because of how they're set up. And yeah.
Representative Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the report. And I'm interested to know what the actual, if you try to determine what the actual physical impact is to the state for single bid contracts. So for instance, if you were to take the percentage of under estimates by competitive bid projects, and just for hypotheticals, assuming that we pulled single bid down to on par or on par with competitive bidding, what kind of dollar figure impact, not just the percentages over or under, but the dollar figure impact? And I think that dollar figure might change from fiscal year to fiscal year, depending on how much is actually being let in total.
Yes. We did in the presentation. We mentioned it's $9.5 million over estimates, the single bid impact, but that's not what you asked for. I know that. So it would be a larger number than that to get down to, like, if we're saying, and you would have to factor that in. You mean just 2 bidders or all bidders, essentially? I don't know if we actually calculated that, but that is something we could do with the numbers we have. It might have to be an average of years because there's obviously fluctuations, but that is something we could calculate, though.
Yeah, and I want to make sure for the record that it doesn't mean that all single bid contracts are inappropriate.
Of course,
I'm just trying to quantify what the impact of single bid method is.
And that's something we're not recommending or making any recommendations to the cabinet saying, don't give out contracts based on the number of bidders. It's just the data shows that single bid contracts tend to be more expensive. Therefore, anything you can do to increase competition is probably advantageous.
If you'll discuss that with the chairs and see if they're willing to pursue that piece of information or not. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeremy, for your testimony today, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here as well. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to adopt the single bid asphalt report. Got a motion? Got a second? And I believe there's a roll call.
Senator Rocky Adams, Senator Carroll, Senator Douglas,
Aye.
Senator Neal, Senator Nemus, Senator Thomas, Representative Blanton, Representative Burke,
Aye.
Representative Fleming,
Aye.
Representative Lockett,
Aye.
Representative Riley, Representative Sharp,
Aye.
Representative Stevenson, Representative Petrie,
Yes.
Vice Chair Howe, Co-Chair Storm,
Aye.
and Co-Chair Bowling.
Yes. Very good. The report has been adopted. At this time, we will move to our next subject. It's a summary of complaint data. And if Mackenzie and Jacob, if you guys would please come to the table, introduce yourselves for the record, and the floor is yours. Thank you all.
I'm an analyst. My name's Jacob Levins.
Mackenzie Ballard. I'm also an analyst. Okay. Good afternoon. As we just stated, we're both Legislative Oversight and Investigations Committee analysts, and we are presenting information on constituent concerns that were collected from consulting with other offices in LRC. This presentation will provide a surface-level overview of concerns committee members might be interested in for a more in-depth review or testimony in the future. From 2008 to 2024, the most common complaints about boards in the information received were about delays in receiving licenses. The Board of Cosmetology was the most common source of complaints, with 72 complaints. The next most common source was the Board of Examiners of Psychology, with 61 complaints. There were also 17 complaints about the Board of Social Work. The Board of Cosmetology is already the subject of a current legislative oversight research study, and staff are writing a full report on the board that is tentatively scheduled to be presented in November. Staff have reviewed all fines for the board for the last 5 years, interviewed board staff, observed board meetings, reviewed requirements for inspections and inspectors, and reviewed administrative procedures of the board. The Board of Examiners of Psychology offered to testify in September to respond to concerns. Unfortunately, the representative that was supposed to testify today had scheduling conflicts and could not be here. To better understand the concerns about the board, legislative oversight staff interviewed 2 anonymous constituents. The people staff talked to said that other practitioners experienced issues but feared retaliation if they testified publicly. The first constituent alleges that it took about 6 months to begin testing for their licensure process. They initially applied in early 2024 and had to submit forms in writing as well as physically mail all required documents. They were told 2 months later that one of their letters of recommendation was missing and that their national exam score had not been submitted. However, the board did not originally request the national exam score. Staff confirmed that the initial application form must be mailed physically and does not request an exam score. Staff also confirmed that the board website, statute, and regulation do not indicate a timeline for the board to respond. The practitioner required assistance from a board member and from state government staff to eventually receive the practical test. The constituent provided a 2024 Kentucky Psychological Association email that acknowledged problems with the board, including delays in new applications. The constituent also provided an email from the Kentucky Psychological Association discussing how the Kentucky Board of Examiners of Psychology voted to recommend that the governor remove one of their members for neglect of duty. The constituent claimed that psychology program staff at schools acknowledged wait times, which are driving students to practice in other states. The constituent also provided screenshots of a national psychologist Facebook group where others discussed how Kentucky was slow in processing applications. The second practitioner legislative oversight staff spoke to claimed that during the last 2 years, only one person worked for the board. The constituent sent all required materials in, but later received a notice that they had not submitted the materials and could not practice. The constituent had receipts from the post office showing the material was sent. Due to a 2-month delay in reapplication, the constituent could not practice for several months. The constituent's main concern in this delay was that they could not take insurance nor participate in contract work without an active license. The constituent, they had trouble contacting the board and were required to submit all materials on physical paper. A local lawyer offered to help the constituent sue the board, and the constituent considered practicing in a different state. The constituent practices in a rural area with few other providers, making the mental health service provider shortage worse. Staff also received a report from a constituent alleging that the Board of Social Work could make it difficult for people to get licensed. The constituent obtained a master's degree in social work and passed their examination. After this, they began their 2-year supervised work with clients to become a fully licensed clinical social worker. The constituent states that they submitted paperwork to the board by email early in the 2-year period to satisfy the board's requirements and received no response. Upon completing their 2-year supervised work period, the constituent applied for their full license. The board issued a disciplinary action against them and their advisor due to a problem with the initial supervisory agreement. The constituent was told that they would need to repeat their 2-year supervised work period. The constituent alleges that they have been told not to make the board mad, as the board can make it harder on them. The constituent relays that many licensees fear board retaliation. Based on these common complaints, boards and commissions may be a good area to review or receive testimony on in the future. Licensing boards can directly influence the livelihood of some professions. The governor's office lists 388 boards on its website. The Department of Professional Licensing provides support for 25 boards. However, that leaves many boards that must operate on their own. Outside of licensing boards, the information legislative oversight staff received showed other concerns. For example, there were concerns about the Education and Labor Cabinet. Constituents cited delays in the adjudication process for unemployment claims. Field office staff are only allowed to offer limited unemployment services and can no longer process claims. For the Department of Transportation, constituents report that it is taking months to get titles for used cars and for salvage titles. This issue appears to be tied to the new vehicle registration system and should be resolved soon. For driver's licenses, it is reported that it takes significant time to get appointments for testing. For the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, constituents are concerned about the lack of participant-directed services in certain areas. Participant-directed services allows people eligible for Medicaid waiver services to choose their own providers for non-medical waiver services. Constituents allege that some regional agencies have stopped offering these services due to staffing. The Cabinet lets individuals apply at regional offices outside their area, but few agencies are willing to accept the applications. Home and community-based waivers provides assistance to the elderly or adults and children with physical disabilities to help them live in the community as independently as possible. It has been alleged that people have begun to be placed on a wait list last year. There are also complaints about prescription drug denials. There appears to be concerns regarding the Public Protection Cabinet and utilities. It was reported to legislative oversight staff that there are multiple complaints by individuals whose only water source is tanks of water hauled to their homes. A review of news articles from the last year similarly identified that Eastern Kentucky experienced water outages. That concludes our presentation. While this presentation was meant as an overview of possible concerns committee members might be interested in for future review, we can take any questions or concerns to our sources and provide answers at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have some questions. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and call Miss Elizabeth Dodd up, who she is one of the individuals that had approached us on this and that we spoke with. And Elizabeth, if you'll state your name and who you're with, and the floor is yours. Thank you. And hit the...
Okay, thank you. My name is Elizabeth Dodd, and I work for the Lexington VA healthcare system. And I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
Thank you. And what has your experience been?
So this is primarily the complaints that I have had are with the Board of Psychology. One of my employees, so I am a supervisor in the mental health service at the VA, and one of my newly hired psychology professionals, she had attempted multiple times to get her temporary license through the Kentucky Board of Psychology. And she gave me a pretty detailed rundown of the timeline with multiple instances of contacting the board, submitting her application to receive a temporary license, and was getting no response. The board grants a 60-day grace period to practice until the temporary license is issued. So as that 60 days was getting closer, she, because at the VA, since we're a federal agency, you can be licensed in any state and practice at the VA. So many of our providers seek licensure outside of Kentucky for this very reason. So she went and got her license through the Ohio Board of Psychology. So she basically reached out to the Ohio board, and within 3 hours, they received her application, turned it around, and issued her an approval to sit for her licensure exam. The Board of Kentucky did not contact her back, so she sent her first application in August of 2022. They did not contact her again until October of that year, saying that she was eligible to sit for her licensing exam, but they had not even notified her that she had a temporary license. And then they notified her the following March of 2023 that her temporary license had been issued, and it had been backdated to February 1st of 2023. And had she waited for all of this to happen, we would have not been able to schedule veterans to be seen by her. We work in, like I said, in mental health. She would not been able to see veterans. We would have had to cancel after the 60-day grace period had she not gone and sought her license in Ohio. And one of the things that is very frustrating is that I do know as a mental health provider that Kentucky does not have a great number of mental health providers, and this, again, limits someone who could do private practice on the side and offer additional services to the state of Kentucky. And then my second complaint has to do with an employee who I learned was having an inappropriate relationship with a patient, and I filed a formal complaint on behalf of that patient to the Board of Psychology. I followed all of the directions on their complaint documents and waited. And then I waited and I waited and I called and I called and I called, and nobody ever answered. Nobody returned my phone calls. The complaint was filed in June of 2023. I finally was able to email someone and get a response back in November of 2023. And this is a very serious complaint. So then when I reached out and I finally spoke to someone, they said they had no idea where the complaint went. They had no information about where or who would have this information. So this had the patient's name, some very, very sensitive information on it. That really concerns me that there was no we're going to look into this. There was nothing indicating that there was some concern about where this very sensitive and private information was sent to. So that's when I just reached out again to file another complaint.
So the response basically in November was, we don't know where it went?
We don't know where it went, so I resubmitted all of the same documents again, and they did move forward with the investigation. I never received anything else from the board other than speaking with the investigator, never like a response or anything like that, but that was it. It moved forward because I reached out again to be able to get that the complaint, to check on it.
When you issued the second complaint,
Mm-hmm.
was it resolved?
So it was, I guess what your definition of resolved would be. So they took the complaint and then they started processing it through their channels to start the investigation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Senator Thomas has a question.
Yes, I want to go back to your report. I want to focus on cosmetology. As you're probably aware, last year this legislature had numerous hearings regarding complaints on the board of cosmetology, particularly in the area of nail technicians and estheticians, but some on cosmetology itself. And to the legislature's credit, we acted to address those concerns and pass Senate Bill 14 this year to address some of those concerns. However, I find it amazing personally that once you get involved in the area, you tend to hear complaints all the time. And like yourself, I continue to hear complaints regarding the Board of Cosmetology. I in your report, I want to ask two things. One, since we passed Senate Bill 14, which became law on July 15th, I want you to over 2024, separate out, if you could, the volume of complaints you heard prior to July 15th, and then I want to compare that to what you're hearing since July 15th. I'd be interested in that information. Secondly, I'd be interested in hearing you focus on fines, inspections, inspectors, administrative procedures. I am continuing to hear complaints about the executive director. And in your November report, I'd like to know how many complaints focus on the current executive director, because that still seems to be a problem there. And you said your report's going to be out on November, at the end of November?
Yes,
Okay.
tentatively we will be presenting that project in November as of currently.
I would like to get a copy of that when that report is completed, so I can review that myself in preparation for the 2025 session.
Yes, that'll be a formal report that all of the committee members here will receive.
Well, I'll be very interested in that, so I will obviously put that on my tickler file.
Okay.
For the end of November.
Okay.
Okay. So again, if I can get one, what the complaints look like prior to July 15th, and what the number of complaints after July 15th, and the complaints that centered on the actions and conduct of the executive director.
Okay, we will definitely make note of that. And as far as especially the complaints portion from July 15th, that should be information that we can get as far as I'm aware. We are focusing more on systems, as you can see in our report. So as far as specific complaints against the director, I'll defer to our CSA. I don't know that we're looking at specific people in this.
Sorry. I will say we typically don't talk about reports while they're under investigation, but Mackenzie is right. We typically look at systems. Just as an office-wide principle, we tend to look at systems instead of people, for the theory that the system should support the operation. Just because you get rid of one person doesn't necessarily mean the operation will get better. I will say we're aware of the complaints. I think the report will be good, is what I will say.
Thank you, Senator Thomas. Representative Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some comments and a question. First on comments, I'm going to go to transportation on the car title delays. That's all surrounds Cavis. I believe it was as of last week, and talking with Commissioner Cole, they have got caught up on those rebuilt titles, and they're now like 4 or 5 days, and they're within the statutory limits now, so that has all been corrected. So just so everyone will know that. I think the driver's license delay still has to do with the regional officers and so forth and so on. My question is, on some of these complaints that you're getting, it sounds like in the Board of Psychology, there's also a time delay there. It's taking a long period of time to get things. So it makes me question a few things. Do they have enough personnel? I can't imagine that they're getting thousands of these a month. I mean, we don't have that many psychologists, right, in Kentucky. So are they still working from home from COVID, or are they actually in the office? Do we know that? And what is their reasoning that have they give, or have you asked for taking so long and processing these things? There should be a quick turnaround.
So due to the kind of quick turnaround time of getting this out and that it's brief overview, we don't have that specific information. It's something that we can look into and get back to you on. I don't have that. I don't know if you're aware since you work with them more, but we don't currently have that information.
And Representative Blanton, the board they were supposed to be here today to testify.
Yes.
They had an emergency situation that came up where they had to cancel that at the last minute. But hopefully they will be back next month, and these questions we can ask them face to face directly and get those answers.
I do have a contact, and I can present these concerns to them and make sure they're aware that they need to talk about this next month.
Okay. Thank you all.
Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to, I guess, get down to two main things and give you a little personal account of what I've gone through. But my first question really is to Mackenzie. And I noticed that the licensed marriage and family therapist is not on the report. Is there any reason why?
So, in doing this is just kind of what we've heard from various committees. None of this is our formal projects as of yet that we've dug into. So there's no particular reason other than that happened to not be a concern floated to us at the time. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think what's being conveyed to me by the psychology and other areas is that this is a workforce impediment. And this goes down, really down to the basic essence of what we need to do to change and look at and restructure or rethink and readdress these boards. In addition to that, what I'm hearing from you all, this is not a member-friendly board. They provide some roadblocks. They're volunteer. That's correct, I would assume. Most of them are?
Some are. That I don't know in particular for that one. Again, none of these topics are anything that we've done a deep dive in.
I think they are. Most of them are volunteer,
Yeah.
and I respect their times because they've got to make it a living and all that good stuff. But these boards been in place for some time, and so the process and procedure should be there. If not, it should be modified in order to make it more friendly to the members. On the personal account, some of y'all know I run a mental health center, and I have licensed marriage family therapists, psychologists, and we have social workers. And so I hired somebody recently, right out of school, that with a marriage and family degree, and went through the process and made the application, and they were rejected. They were rejected on a very, very minor item in there that basically said that there was no notification statement in there from the supervisor, which that information is already embedded in the law, in the statute, which really irritated me. So we had about 5 to 6 clients already lined up with that individual, ready to go to provide service, and we had to reschedule all of them until the following month, and we finally got okay by the board 3 weeks later. I just found that really unacceptable. I found that really being inflexible in terms of looking at the situation, making some modifications, giving approval, say, hey, we'll approve this, get you going, but we need this by X date. And that could be easily accommodated and satisfied doing that. So I just want to let the committee know that these boards need to be really examined and thought through, and in terms of being more user-friendly, not an impediment to the workforce, in order to make sure that we can provide that. Because hearing people go outside the state, that's not right. that should be placed. They should be here providing that service within our Commonwealth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Fleming. Senator Rocky Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess my question is kind of along the lines as Representative Fleming's. You know, we talk about how we need to re-examine these boards, and this isn't licensure specific, but we have boards that have been constituted for a lot of years that oversee economies that are very different nowadays than they were when they were first constituted. So is there a way to include within your report kind of when, like a list of boards and a list of when the boards were constituted and have they been modernized at all? Because just with the licensure, we need to constantly do better with how we achieve a better customer service product. We need to look at all boards, and if they have jurisdiction over present economies, do they have the right membership? And I think that's a big place for us to modernize.
Okay. So as my CSA stated, we don't want to talk too much about our report while we're still ongoing. As of currently, I can tell you it focuses on cosmetology. That's what we were asked to look at, is that particular board. I could see possibly an appendix if it in that report, if it's something that
just a general. I'm just looking for like a general information piece, which is here are the boards, here's when they were constituted or last looked at, just for the legislature's FYI to know what's been updated, what's been looked at, and what hasn't been looked at in years.
That's something we should be able to provide outside of the report. That just something like that can be something that's we can get done and provide it. Again, I'll defer to my CSA and whether or not that should be provided in the report or just as a general, if that's something you all are interested in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I will mention we did our staff did a report on all boards and commissions.
Very good. Co-Chair Storm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the driver's licensing delays, are you aware of any complaints regarding the medical review board specifically causing delays with individuals being able to get their driver's license renewed?
So I will say medical review board in general was something that kind of came up, but we didn't have any specific constituent complaints, and as far as I know, we didn't have anything that overlapped with the driver's license. Again, this was kind of just an overview of things floated to us fairly recently, so that doesn't mean that doesn't exist. But it's not something that came to us at this time.
Could I request that you kind of dig into that, because we just dealt with this, I think myself, Senator Howell, Senator Higdon, all last week regarding an individual.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Burke.
Thank you, Co-Chair, and thank you all for this presentation. My question relates to slide number 10, where you have listed there are 388 boards identified by the governor's office, and then 25 boards that are supported by the Department of Professional Licensing. Is the Kentucky Bar Association included in this number, or are they in their own category?
I will say off the top, I am a lawyer. I am part of the Bar Association. I actually do not know that off the top of my head. My inclination would be to say it is independent, because we are generally independent for things, but I do not know that for sure, and we can check on that and get back to you.
I would appreciate that. I'm thinking maybe we're under the support services section, but if we're not, I know that similar issues exist within the Bar Association.
Yes.
My nonprofit had to dismiss a judge because he, after 40 years of practice, couldn't get his licensure in Kentucky timely.
Yes.
It seems to me that that's problematic, and I know that's not the only example. So I hope that we can look to see whether they would be included in this, and if not, consider whether they should be. Thank you.
Very good. Seeing no more questions, I do appreciate you all getting this together and presenting this today. Ms. Dodd, thank you for being here as well. Thank you for your testimony. No action is needed on this report today, and thank you very much. Lastly, before we adjourn, I will make note that there is child fatality and near fatality external review panel response to a member. I believe Senator Thomas had asked for some additional information that's been included in the packet. And I want to thank the committee, the staff on the committee for gathering these reports today. They put a lot of time into this. While they're also doing their wide-ranging subjects that we'll have over the next few months, they're more in-depth studies as well. So we thank them for all their work. I don't see any other business. Our next meeting is September the 12th. And Co-Chair Storm, we will hear the staff report on child removal and reunification. And with that, see no other business before us. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.